The very same thing that the enemy's using, God uses for good. Look at the cross. It's the enemy. If you've ever seen the enemy, it's the enemy crucifying God. On the other hand, it's God overcoming the enemy. The enemy uses obstacles for you. The enemy tries to block the plans, tries to wall up the golden gate in your life. Put the dome of the rock, a substitute right on where God wants you to be or what he has for you. When the angel came to Daniel, he mentioned what the principality tried to do. He's saying, this is why I'm late. You know, when you're late, you want to explain it. So the angel says, listen, sorry, I'm late, but traffic jam. It was a principality, you know. But then he got right on with the purposes. So remember that. It's not about the attacks on your life. It's about the plans on your life. Let the attacks focus you all the more on the plans. Get on with it. The enemy is okay if you want to focus on him your whole life. We are to be aware of him. That's what Paul said. But we're not to be dwelling on him. Because when you're dwelling on him, you're not fulfilling the plans. So get on with it. Even in the middle of an attack, get on with the plans. Don't just focus on the attack. Get on with the plans. The attack is about the plans. And there's something more. The enemy doesn't attack indiscriminately. Prophetically here, he's focusing on Israel, Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. So get this, his attacks actually reveal the very things that are chosen by God. The enemy's attack on your life is revealing, number one, you are chosen by God, but also specifically revealing within your life, particularly things that are chosen to be used of God that the enemy's trying to destroy. Your purity. You know, the enemy wants to destroy it because God wants to use it. The enemy may be attacking especially your family, your marriage. God wants to use it. The enemy may be especially attacking your finances. God wants to use it. The enemy's attacking your relationships with others. God wants to use it. God wants the enemy may be attacking by having you be afraid to talk to people. God wants to use you to spread the word. Amen. The enemy wants you in fear. God wants you to overcome it. With some of you, and you may think about this, I mean, there's particular things the enemy attacks. With some of you, the enemy's been doing everything he could to distract you, divert you, because when you're so distracted with everything else and all the stuff of life, you're not going to do his will. The enemy's attack actually contain the revelation for you of what God wants to use. And not only the focus of his attack, but the timing of his attack may reveal the timing that God wants to do something very great. There are certain times when it was obvious in my life and in the ministry when the enemy was just going crazy. It was linked to something great that God was going to do. Right. One of those times was when I was asked to go on our first kind of prophetic mission to the nations, to India. And the moment I said yes, all hell broke loose. That very weekend. And it never let up. It was craziness, false reports, the tickets were gone, everything, the plane, the engine started falling apart in flight. I mean, I can tell you so much, everything up until the very end of it. But at the end of it, we saw about 70,000 Indian people pray to receive the Lord. The enemy knew it. You know, just before the first book that I ever wrote came out, I said, pray. That week came Hurricane Irene to Beth Israel, flooded. When another book came out, on the exact day of the release, stroke of midnight, I become paralyzed. Mysterious infection. I'm in the hospital for the week. I've never been in the hospital overnight, but it was the release date of the book. Another book comes out on the day of the release. I get a strange pain in my abdomen. My appendix burst. I'm in the hospital again for about a week. You want to find the only times I've ever stayed overnight in a hospital, look at the release date of the books. Now, I'm not saying it has to happen, and God forbid, all that, but when we were starting Beth Israel, it was like that too. It was like we're trudging against the snow. But God was going to do something great. Don't fear the attack, because God is greater than any attack. And nothing will stop his purposes if you don't stop. If you don't stop. He'll actually use the enemy, not only to not stop it, he'll use the attack to bring about the purposes. That's the double blessing you get by not giving up. by keep going. He's not only going to not let it stop, he's going to actually use it to make it happen. Richard Wurmbrand was a pastor in Romania, communist Romania. He was in prison for his faith for years. He couldn't minister. So the enemy thought, I have this guy. I've stopped him completely. And yet in prison, he used him to minister and get ministered by God, that when he came out, he started a worldwide ministry to all the persecuted believers across the world. The enemy tried to stop, God used it to fulfill. Joseph in Egypt, in exile, at the end, he says to his brothers, listen, you meant this for evil. This was evil. But God meant it for good. The very same thing that the enemy's using, God uses for good. Look at the cross. It's the enemy. If you've ever seen the enemy, it's the enemy crucifying God. On the other hand, it's God overcoming the enemy.
Yes. Amen. Amen.
And recognize the strategies. When instead of just don't panic, recognize what's happening. As with the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, the enemy will try to stop God's purposes in your life by giving you a substitute for what is God's best. God says, this is best. You have to seek my best. Don't settle for something else. And he's going to try to redirect your gifts, your calling. You say, listen, you got a call, you got a gift, to use it for money. Not that God can't use money, but that's not what you serve. Or maybe the enemy, your angel of Persia, has been delaying something in your life. There's opposition. Now God can say no to something, and he can say wait. But there are times when something is God, yet it could be delayed for different reasons, and it could be the enemy. Like you want to live victoriously, the enemy's going to try to stop that. So don't get discouraged when something comes up. I want to get stronger, and then something happened. You messed up. Don't get discouraged. Keep going. You want to share the word, and I got stuck. The enemy doesn't want you to. That just makes sense. Look at the man used so gigantically for the purposes of God, Paul. Paul said he was separated from birth for the gospel. The enemy knew it. Look at how he tried to. First he got Paul totally against the gospel. Here he is, Paul. He took his zeal and made it against the gospel. He thought he was serving God against the gospel. So here he's fighting the very thing that he was born for. Before you knew the Lord, you might have been fighting the very thing that you were born for. I did. I was an atheist. I argued against the gospel all the time. God knew it. The enemy knew it. God knew it. The enemy had Paul beaten, persecuted, thrown in jail. Paul even speaks about being buffeted by a messenger, by a principality. But Paul didn't stop. Look at what he accomplished. Look at his life. He never stopped. He could have. He was beaten, thrown in jail. How many of us might have stopped? He didn't stop. Now let's take this home. Make it very practical. Number one, recognize that the enemy has already tried to stop the purpose of God in your life. Recognize it. Number two, look at the things he has attacked you with. Those things are most likely things that God has chosen to use in your life. Know that obstacles and delays are part of this fight. Don't let them stop you if something is God's will. Do not let it stop you. Keep going. Don't let the attacks distract you from the purposes of God. Get on with the purpose. Hi, I'm Jonathan Cahn, and I hope you were blessed with the video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Feel free to share your reactions with your comments and how you were blessed, and share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.